The crash of metal against wet concrete ripped through the night. My wheelchair lay twisted on the porch, rainwater splashing over its frame. My daughter-in-law stood in the doorway, eyes glinting with triumph as she hissed, "A house isn't free just because you roll through it." My son's silence cut deeper than her words, his face lowered, but he didn't move, didn't speak. My stomach tightened, breath caught. If they could throw out the chair that carried me, what would they throw out next? Backhand index pointing right. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments, where you're watching from right now. The morning after that storm, I woke with the taste of iron in my mouth, not from blood, but from shame. My wheelchair wasn't by my bed where I had left it. For a moment, I thought I'd gone mad. Then I saw it through the window, sitting outside like a rusting dog chained in the rain. The seat was soaked, the wheels muddy, its frame bent where it had slammed against the steps. It wasn't just a chair anymore, it was a warning. I reached for the wall, dragging myself until my legs burned. Each shuffle across the hardwood was a reminder, without that chair, I was nothing to them. My daughter-in-law's words rang in my head, cruel and mocking. A house isn't free just because you roll through it. By the time I reached the kitchen, they were already at the table. My son kept his eyes on his phone, tapping away, pretending not to see me. My daughter-in-law's smile widened as if she'd been waiting for me to crawl in. "Morning," she said sweetly, sliding a plate of eggs across the table, away from me, toward herself. "Sleep well?" I gripped the back of a chair, breath heavy. "Where's my wheelchair?" She looked at me, feigning innocence. "Oh. You mean that thing?" It was dripping all over the floor. "We can't have the house ruined, can we?" Her tone was playful, but her eyes were knives. My son cleared his throat. Maybe you should keep it outside, Dad. Less clutter in here." I stared at him, heart pounding. Less clutter. Was that what I was now? My daughter, Emily, sat beside them. She lowered her fork, her lips pressed tight. "He didn't mean it like that, Dad. Just try to keep peace. Keep peace." I bit back the words I wanted to hurl at her. Instead, I reached for the chair at the table, lowered myself slowly, my legs trembling like broken beams. The silence was suffocating, until my daughter-in-law broke it with a laugh that froze my blood. "You know," she said, tilting her head, "without that chair, you're nothing. Isn't it funny how a piece of metal is the only thing keeping you standing?" The word struck harder than a fist. My son said nothing. Emily glanced at me, then away, shame creeping into her cheeks. I clenched my fists under the table. For years, I'd built this house, worked my hands to bone, poured every paycheck into these walls. And now, I was a guest, mocked in my own kitchen. My daughter-in-law pushed her plate away, her smirk never fading. "You should be grateful, you know. Not everyone gets to live here for free." Her words dropped like stones into the silence. My son shifted uncomfortably, but still said nothing. Emily whispered, "He's your father." The silence that followed was louder than any argument. I glanced toward the window where the wheelchair sat abandoned, raindrops sliding off its frame like tears. They wanted me to see it. They wanted me to feel smaller, weaker, dependent. But what they didn't know was this: weakness has teeth. And I wasn't done biting yet. I gripped the table edge, my voice low but sharp. "It's my house, not yours." The smirk faltered, just for a second. My daughter-in-law leaned back, her chair creaking. My son looked up from his phone, eyes caught between guilt and anger. Emily stared at her plate, as though it might swallow her whole. The moment hung heavy in the air. I'd said it. The line had been drawn. And I knew, they wouldn't let me forget it. The kitchen scene lingered in my bones all day, but the real blow came when I stepped outside that evening. My wheelchair sat not by the porch, not under the overhang where it might have dried, but near the trash bins, wedged between black plastic bags and a broken mop. Its wheels leaned awkwardly as though it had been tossed there like another piece of junk. I stood at the doorway, fists tight on the frame. The message couldn't have been clearer. In their eyes, I was disposable. "Dad, are you coming with us or not?" Emily's voice called from behind. They were going to the grocery store. My daughter-in-law's idea. A chance, she'd said, to show the community we're a happy family. The irony was thick enough to choke on. With Emily's help, I got the chair back onto the driveway. It wobbled, the wheels still damp from last night's storm, mud streaking the rims. Every push forward groaned like an old wound reopening. At the store, the air was colder than usual. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, buzzing like gossip itself. People's eyes darted to me, then away, as though I carried a sign they weren't supposed to read. My daughter-in-law stayed close, all smiles and sweetness that soured my stomach. "Dad's adjusting, aren't you, Dad?" she said loudly, her hand resting on my son's arm. Her voice carried down the aisle. "But of course, he should pay his way like everyone else. Nothing's free." My chest tightened. The words weren't for me, they were for the ears nearby. Mrs. Green, my neighbor of 30 years, was standing at the end of the aisle. She froze, a carton of milk in her hands, her lips pressing thin. I caught her eyes for a second before she shook her head ever so slightly. And then came the dagger. My son chuckled. Not loud, not with joy, but with a practiced sound, a fake laugh meant to blend in with her cruelty. "Yeah," he said, looking at the cereal boxes instead of me. "Maybe just a little contribution, Dad. It'd be fair." The air left my lungs. Fair. That was his word. As though I hadn't carried him through school, through life, through the roof he now slept under. Emily tugged his sleeve. "You don't mean that," she whispered, but her voice was too soft, drowned in the hum of whispers now circling the aisle. I sat frozen in my chair, gripping the armrest until my knuckles burned. All around me, people pretended to shop while stealing glances, their baskets idle, their ears hungry. A man by the produce section leaned toward his wife. "Did you hear that? Making his own father pay rent." Another muttered, "Shameful." The murmurs followed me through every aisle. By the time we reached the register, it felt like I was on display, not a man, but a spectacle. Outside, the evening air was thick with smoke from someone's chimney. As Emily helped push me toward the car, I glanced up at the windows across the street. Mrs. Green was there again, her silhouette framed against the curtains. She stood still, watching. And then, with a slow, deliberate motion, she drew the curtain shut. The sound of the fabric sliding closed was louder than the traffic around us. I knew then, my humiliation was no longer private. It had seeped out of the house, down the aisles of the grocery store, across the street, into every whisper and every glance. And for the first time, I felt like a tenant in my own life. The house smelled of damp bills and fried onions that night. I found the dining table covered, not with plates or food, but with envelopes, receipts, and the cruel sound of my daughter-in-law's laughter as she shuffled them like poker cards. "Utilities, groceries, car insurance," she said, tapping each envelope with a painted nail. "All of it adds up. And guess who eats, showers, and turns on the lights just like the rest of us?" Her smile slid toward me like oil. My son sat at the head of the table, silent, his jaw tight. He wasn't leading, he was letting her lead. I lowered myself into the chair across from them, my legs trembling as if the floor had shifted beneath me. My eyes caught the wheelchair. It had been shoved into the corner, half hidden behind a cabinet. Not stored, not respected, just pushed aside like clutter. As if I was already gone, I muttered under my breath. "What was that?" she asked, voice sharp. I didn't answer. Instead, I reached for the pile of bills. One of them was already open, the handwriting across the check in a script that wasn't mine. My pension account number stared back at me. "Who gave you permission to touch this?" I said, my voice cracking like a whip. She leaned forward, her perfume filling the air like smoke. "It's called managing the household, Dad. You know, being responsible." Emily shifted uncomfortably. "Maybe it's not right to." But my daughter-in-law cut her off with a raised hand. "Your father should feel proud he can still contribute. Isn't that what you always wanted, sir? To provide for your family?" The sarcasm in her voice stung worse than the words. My son finally spoke, but his words cut deeper than silence. "It's just practical, Dad. You don't have to worry about details, we'll handle it." "We'll handle it." Meaning, they'd handle my money, my security, my freedom. I slammed the envelope back onto the table, my hands shaking. "You will not use my pension like it's your paycheck." Emily's eyes darted between us, panic flickering in her gaze. "Dad, maybe just, don't fight them. It'll make things easier." Easier. That word poisoned my ears. Easier for them, not for me. My daughter-in-law chuckled softly, her voice low enough to slice. "We're not asking, old man. We're telling you. This house costs money. And if you want to keep sitting under this roof, you'll hand it over." The chair in the corner seemed to shrink further into the shadows, its frame blending into the wall, invisible, just like they wanted me to be. I stood slowly, my hands gripping the table for balance. My breath rattled in my chest, but my voice came out steady. "I built this house with my hands. Every brick, every board, paid for with my sweat. And now you sit here, demanding what isn't yours." Her smile faltered for a flicker, but then returned sharper. She leaned close, her words dripping like acid. "Sign it, or we'll sign you out of this house." The words hung in the air, heavy as a slammed door. The tension in the dining room clung to the walls long after the bills were put away. I could still hear her voice echoing through the house, "Sign it, or we'll sign you out of this house." The next night, they struck again. Dinner was on the table, but it wasn't food, it was another performance. My daughter-in-law planted herself at the head, spoon in hand like a judge's gavel. She didn't look at me as she spoke to the air, to my son, to Emily, to anyone but the man who had built the house she sat in. "This isn't working," she said. "He doesn't listen. He doesn't respect rules. A house has rules. And if he can't follow them..." Her eyes finally locked onto mine, sharp as broken glass. "Then he leaves." My son shifted uncomfortably but didn't speak. The cowardice in his silence burned hotter than her venom. I forced myself to glance at Emily. For a second, I hoped to see resistance. Instead, I saw hesitation turn into agreement. "He's right, Dad," she whispered, almost too quietly. "Maybe it's better this way. Better this way." The word stung worse than open betrayal. The food on the table turned to ash in my mouth. The walls I had painted, the floors I had polished, the roof I had repaired in storms, it all suddenly felt like a stranger's house. My wheelchair sat by my side, wheels locked. I noticed the detail as if it had a voice of its own, trapped, frozen, confined. Just like they wanted me to be. I clenched the armrests until my knuckles ached. They thought they were winning. They thought they had caged me. My daughter-in-law smirked, pushing her plate aside. "It's simple. Obey, or leave. Choose now." The word struck like a verdict. I looked at her, then at my son. My own blood couldn't meet my eyes. Emily's face was pale, her gaze glued to the table. I wanted to rage, to hurl every plate in that room to the floor, to make them hear the echo of my fury. But rage was what they expected. Rage was weakness. Instead, I lowered my voice, each word sharp and cold. "Enjoy your dinner. Then I pushed back from the table, the chair wheels squeaking under the pressure of my grip. Their eyes followed me as I rolled down the hallway. In my room, I pulled open the closet. The air smelled of cedar and dust, but under the hanging coats sat a small suitcase. My hands shook as I pulled it out, not from weakness, but from resolve. One by one, I folded shirts, slid in socks, tucked in an old photo of my wife. My chest tightened at the sight of her smile, but it steeled me too. The zipper rasped closed, loud as thunder in the silence. They thought they had me cornered. But cages, no matter how strong, always have a door. As I rolled back toward the hall, suitcase balanced on my lap, I caught Emily standing at the doorway. Her lips parted, but no words came out. Her eyes lingered on me, uncertain, trembling, torn between loyalty and guilt. I met her gaze for only a second before looking away. If doubt was creeping in, it was her battle to fight. For now, mine was only beginning. The next day, my son announced we had an appointment. He didn't ask. He didn't explain. He only said, "It's for the best, Dad. Just come." When we pulled into the lawyer's office, my stomach dropped. The building stood tall and sterile, its glass doors reflecting back a warped version of myself, older, smaller, a man they were trying to erase. Inside, the air smelled of ink and dust. My daughter-in-law walked ahead with a confidence that made my skin crawl, clutching a folder like it was her victory flag. My son followed behind, silent as ever. Emily trailed, her eyes darting everywhere but mine. We entered a room lined with shelves of leather-bound books. Behind the desk sat Mr. Harlan, a lawyer I vaguely remembered from years back, when I signed insurance papers. His face was polite, but his eyes sharp. "Mr. Thompson," he greeted me, standing briefly before gesturing to the chair across from him. "Please, sit." I rolled my wheelchair closer, the squeak of the wheels echoing through the hall like a warning bell. My daughter-in-law placed the folder on the desk and slid it toward him. "We just need a quick signature," she said sweetly. "Dad wants everything to be fair, so he's agreeing to a small rental contribution. Just to keep things simple." Her words were dipped in honey, but the venom dripped between every syllable. Mr. Harlan flipped open the folder, his brow furrowing. His pen hovered, but he didn't write. He glanced up at me. "Is this true, Mr. Thompson? You want to sign this?" My throat tightened. "I haven't seen it." My daughter-in-law's smile didn't falter. "Oh, he trusts us. Don't you, Dad?" Emily shifted uncomfortably. My son avoided my gaze, staring at the edge of the desk. The lawyer's eyes flicked down the page again, and his voice dropped lower. "This isn't a rental agreement. This is a liability waiver. If you sign this, Mr. Thompson, you forfeit ownership rights to your home. You'd be listed as a tenant, not an owner." My blood ran cold. My daughter-in-law's face twitched for half a second before she leaned back, laughing too loudly. "Oh, don't make it sound so dramatic. It's just paperwork." The lawyer didn't laugh. He turned his gaze back to me, then to the wheelchair beneath me. The chair creaked slightly, the sound filling the silence. He nodded once, firmly. "You fought too hard to roll in here for me to let you sign this away." His tone carried weight, and for the first time in weeks, someone in that room looked at me with respect instead of disdain. I met his eyes, and something inside me steadied. "Then I won't sign." My daughter-in-law's smile cracked. My son finally spoke, his voice sharp with frustration. "Dad, don't be stubborn. Just do it." "Do it?" I snapped. "One wrong signature, and I'm nothing but a guest in my own house." The lawyer closed the folder and slid it back across the desk. "Then my advice is clear, don't." The silence that followed was heavy. Emily's hands fidgeted in her lap. She didn't speak, but her eyes met mine, wide, scared, uncertain. As we left, the lobby was full of clients waiting. They watched the four of us walk out, me in my chair, them flanking me like guards escorting a prisoner. The whispers began the moment the door shut behind us. I could feel it in their stares, people could see something was wrong. My humiliation was no longer confined to the kitchen, or the grocery aisle. Now strangers knew. A lawyer knew. The community was beginning to understand what my children and their spouses were trying to do. And humiliation, once public, doesn't fade. It spreads. As I rolled through the glass doors back into the daylight, I knew one thing with certainty: they had nearly trapped me. One pen stroke, and my entire life would have been erased. And they would try again. I spent the night staring at the ceiling, the lawyer's words echoing in my head. If you sign this, you're no longer an owner. They wanted me erased on paper, turned into nothing more than a tenant in the home I'd built. And for the first time, I realized something important: I wasn't powerless. The next morning, I didn't sit at their table. I didn't roll my wheelchair into their circus of stares and smirks. Instead, I folded it, tucked it neatly beside the bed, and called a taxi. The chair felt lighter in my hands than it ever had before. Not a burden, but a tool, a weapon they didn't know I had. At a small roadside motel, I spread out papers across the desk like a soldier laying out a battle plan. My pension statements, bank accounts, insurance forms. Years of responsibility written in black ink. For decades, I'd signed checks for them, mortgages, tuition, bills. Always giving, always providing. Now, I signed for myself. The first call was to the bank. "This is Mr. Thompson. I'd like to change my pension deposit details. Effective immediately." The second was to the mortgage company. "Cancel autopay. I'll be handling payments directly." The third was to the utility provider. "Remove joint access. Only my name, my approval." Each click of a keyboard, each confirmation number whispered over the phone, felt like a bullet chambered in silence. They thought they'd cornered me. But money, control, wasn't theirs. It was mine. As the final call ended, I leaned back in the stiff motel chair, staring at the folded wheelchair by the wall. It wasn't abandoned, not humiliated. It was waiting, steady, like me. That night, I imagined the scene back at the house. My daughter-in-law, sitting smugly with bills spread across the table. My son nodding, too afraid to lift his head. Emily quiet in her corner. And then, the moment the system rejected their attempts, I almost smiled. The first ripple came sooner than I expected. My phone buzzed with 3 missed calls from my son. Then 6 from her. Each voicemail grew sharper. "Where are you? Dad, the water bill didn't go through. Don't you dare mess with this house. We'll fix it, with or without you." Her anger was a symphony, but I stayed silent. By evening, Emily's voice filled the phone instead. Softer, strained. "Dad, just come back. Please. Don't make this worse." I closed my eyes, listening to the cracks forming in her loyalty. It wasn't victory, not yet. But it was movement. Hours later, I imagined the climax, the thing I'd been waiting for. My daughter-in-law, scrolling through her phone at the grocery checkout, swiping a card linked to my pension. The familiar beep of denial. Declined. I could almost see the fury tightening her face, the whispers of people in line behind her, the humiliation she couldn't hide. That image carried me to sleep. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel like a prisoner in my own life. I felt like a man again. This wasn't the end. It wasn't even the middle. But it was the first strike. And the first strike is always the hardest. The morning after I pulled the plug on their lifeline, my phone lit up like a warning flare. 12 missed calls from my son. 8 from her. The voicemail started angry. "You think you can play games with us? You'll regret this, old man. Then they shifted. My daughter's voice slipped in, trembling, softer. Dad, please, they're saying we can't pay the bills. Just fix this. By afternoon, the tone turned desperate. We can't buy groceries. What are you doing? And finally, silence. No more calls. Only the weight of my choices pressing against the quiet motel walls. I left that night and went to the diner on Main Street. I hadn't been there in months. The smell of coffee and fried bacon wrapped around me like an old blanket. The waitress, a woman named Marla who'd served me for years, blinked in surprise when she saw me roll through the door. Mr. Thompson, she said, smiling. Been a while. She slid a menu in front of me, then her hand brushed the back of my wheelchair before she poured the coffee. Not dismissive, not mocking, gentle, like acknowledgement. It was the first kindness I'd felt in weeks. But kindness is fragile. Behind me, I heard a whisper that wasn't meant to stay hidden. That's him, the one they say refuses to help his family. Living off them for free. Another voice, sharper, replied, disgraceful. Poor girl, married to his son, carrying him like dead weight. The coffee tasted bitter after that. I sat there, staring at the reflection in the diner window, me, hunched over the cup, the chair gleaming under the fluorescent lights. They were twisting my story already. Turning me from provider into parasite. My phone buzzed again. A message this time, from her. Everyone will know what you did. You'll be the one shamed, not us. I set the phone down, the glow of the screen fading like a dying flame. Then Marla's voice cut the silence. Don't mind them, Mr. Thompson. Folks talk, but truth has a way of showing itself. Her words steadied me. But before I could answer, the door opened. The jingle of the bell was followed by the heavy tread of boots. A uniformed police officer stepped inside, his eyes sweeping the diner. The conversations around me stilled, forks paused mid-air, cups lowered. His gaze landed on me. And in that moment, I felt every whisper, every rumor, every lie tighten around my throat like a noose. The officer in the diner didn't say a word. He only looked at me, nodded once, and walked out. But his presence was enough. The whispers grew sharper, bolder. My daughter-in-law's lies had already spread through town like fire through dry grass. By the next day, I learned the truth, they had taken it further. They hadn't just whispered, I'd heard from the bank itself. Someone had attempted to take out a $50,000 loan against my home. My name forged at the bottom of the application. So when my son and his wife showed up outside the bank that afternoon, shouting my name across the parking lot, I knew the moment had come. Dad, my son barked, storming toward me. You're sabotaging us. His voice cracked under the weight of panic. My daughter-in-law wasn't panicked. She was furious. Her heels clicked against the pavement like gunshots as she pointed at me. You think cutting us off makes you smart? You've made a fool of yourself. Everyone knows you've abandoned your family. A small crowd had gathered already, bank patrons, tellers peering through the glass, a couple of clerks standing near the doors. I held my ground in the wheelchair, hands gripping the armrests. For once, the chair didn't feel like a prison. It felt like a bench, a platform. The banker himself stepped outside, face stern. He held a folder in his hand and addressed the crowd more than me. Mr. Thompson, he said, your suspicions were correct. We reviewed the application. This, he lifted the papers, is not your signature. It's forgery. Gasps rippled through the crowd. My daughter-in-law's face paled before she quickly twisted it into anger. Lies. He doesn't know what he's talking about. The banker's eyes narrowed. Ma'am, your husband submitted the paperwork. Your husband tried to steal this man's home. The weight of the words hung heavy. My son's face drained of color. His mouth opened, then closed again, no excuse finding its way past his lips. From the back of the crowd, a voice shouted, "Shame on you." Another muttered, "Stealing from your own father?" A man spit on the ground near my son's feet. For once, the whispers weren't about me. They were about them. I leaned forward, voice steady but sharp enough to cut. For once, my chair isn't a cage. It's the judge between us. My daughter-in-law's composure cracked. She stepped closer, her words venom whispered just for me. "If you ruin me, I'll take you down with me." Her eyes burned with fury, her lips curled in a snarl only I could see. The banker cleared his throat, addressing me again. "Mr. Thompson, if you'd like, we can escalate this to law enforcement. Forgery is a serious crime." The crowd murmured louder, their eyes darting between me and them. My son lowered his gaze, his wife seething beside him. Emily stood at the edge, hands trembling, eyes locked on me with something that looked almost like pleading. And I knew then, the battle was no longer private. It was war. The confrontation outside the bank lit a fire in me. For weeks, I had been reacting, surviving. But when the banker exposed their fraud, I realized something: the tide had turned. The truth wasn't just on my side, it was finally visible to others. The next morning, I rolled into Mr. Harlan's office, my lawyer, carrying a folder of my own. Not bills, not receipts, proof. Bank records. Pension statements. The attempted forgery notice. Evidence of everything they had tried to steal. Mr. Harlan studied the papers, jaw tightening. Then he looked at me with a respect that felt foreign, almost shocking after so many weeks of humiliation. "Mr. Thompson, you've endured enough. It's time to take back what's yours." I nodded, my voice low. "I don't want revenge. I want peace. But if they've chosen war, then I'll end it." He leaned across the desk. "Then we'll file for eviction. And a restraining order." The words were heavy, final, and yet freeing. For the first time, it felt like I was no longer the hunted. I was making the first move. As he drafted the documents, my wheelchair squeaked faintly against the floor. He glanced at it, then placed a firm hand on the armrest. "You fought too hard to sit here today. Don't let them steal that fight from you again." I swallowed hard. That touch carried more weight than any speech. Later that afternoon, the sheriff himself came to meet me. A broad man with weathered hands and eyes that had seen too many family disputes. He studied the papers Mr. Harlan had prepared. Forgery, fraud, financial manipulation. "This is no longer just family business, it's criminal," he said firmly. I nodded. "So, will you serve it?" He slid the documents back into their folder and tucked them under his arm. "I'll serve it today." The moment stretched. My chest felt lighter, as if the walls that had closed in for months were finally cracking open. But just as relief began to settle, I heard a voice from the doorway. "Dad." Emily stood there, her eyes red, her voice trembling. "Dad, please, don't do this." Her words sliced deeper than any of her husband's threats. For weeks, she had echoed their cruelty or sat in silence. But now, her tone was different, not mocking, not cold. Torn. I looked at her, my heart aching. "Emily, they forged my name. They tried to erase me. What would you have me do?" Her lips quivered. She didn't answer. She just stepped back, her gaze falling to the floor. The sheriff cleared his throat, ending the silence. "Mr. Thompson, I'll call you once the notice is served." That evening, I sat by the window of my motel, the sun sinking over the horizon. My phone buzzed once, then again. And then came the moment I had been waiting for. From across town, on that same street I had once called home, the sheriff approached the door. My son opened it, my daughter-in-law standing just behind him. The sheriff's voice was calm, but the words were sharp as a blade. "You've been served." I wasn't there in person, but I didn't need to be. I could imagine the scene, the sheriff's steady hand, the paper extended, the ink marking their downfall. And most vividly of all, I could see their faces. My son's shame. My daughter-in-law's fury. Her smirk, finally twisted into silence. The day after the sheriff served the notice, the town buzzed with a new kind of energy. Whispers no longer clung to me, they clung to them. By noon, I heard it firsthand. At the diner, Marla leaned over my booth, voice low. "They say collectors showed up at his work this morning." Loud. Ugly. Everyone saw. I raised my brows. "Collectors?" She nodded grimly. "Your son owes more than he can pay. Gambling debts, they're saying. Thousands. He's been juggling them for months." The words cut like ice, though not at me, at the image of the boy I'd raised, the man who'd chosen silence over his father. I left the diner and rolled toward the street corner where his office sat. The scene met me halfway. Two black sedans, men in sharp suits and colder eyes. My son's co-workers stood in a huddle, whispering as those men barked demands loud enough for the whole block to hear. "You've missed 3 payments. No more chances." Then, the blow, his boss stormed out, his voice booming. "In my office, now. You think you can gamble with my client's trust? You're finished." The crowd gasped as my son was dragged inside, pale and sweating. When he stumbled back out minutes later, his desk supplies were crammed into a cardboard box. I watched from across the street, invisible to him, the polished frame of my wheelchair catching the afternoon sun. For the first time in months, I didn't feel small in it. I felt tall. The lies they had wrapped themselves in, perfect son, perfect husband, perfect provider, were crumbling, collapsing in the daylight for everyone to see. And then came Emily. She hurried down the sidewalk, eyes wide, cheeks streaked with tears. She spotted me before she spotted them. Her steps faltered, then carried her across the street toward me. "Dad," her voice was barely a whisper. "Is it true? About the debts?" I didn't answer. I didn't have to. The truth was unfolding behind me, loud enough for the whole town. Her husband, her perfect partner, stood outside with a cardboard box, his boss glaring from the doorway. She pressed a hand to her mouth, her body trembling. I didn't know. I thought. Her words faded into the noise of the crowd. I leaned slightly forward, my voice calm but cutting. "You chose to believe him instead of me. Now you see." Her tears welled, spilling over. For a moment, she looked like the little girl who used to cling to my hand when thunder rattled the windows. But that little girl was gone, buried under choices she'd made. The silence between us stretched. Her lips moved, barely audible, as though she was speaking only to herself. "Dad, what do I do now?" The question hung in the air, trembling, fragile. I said nothing. Some answers couldn't be handed over. They had to be earned. Sunday morning, I decided to do what I hadn't done in weeks. I went to church. The bells tolled over town, their echoes carrying through crisp autumn air. I rolled slowly down the aisle, each creak of the wheels echoing in the silence that followed me. People turned their heads, whispers fluttering through the pews like restless wings. But this time, the whispers weren't about me. They were about them. I could feel it in the glances, eyes darting not at my chair, but at my daughter-in-law across the room. She sat rigid beside my son, chin raised in defiance, but her hands fidgeted on her lap. Emily sat between them, pale, her gaze fixed on the hymn book she didn't open. The sermon began with familiar words of faith, but halfway through, Pastor William's tone shifted. His eyes scanned the room, then settled on my son and his wife. "Fraud thrives in silence," he said, his voice heavy with meaning. But truth must be spoken, even when it hurts. The congregation stilled. No one coughed. No one moved. He looked directly at my family. To take from those who gave you everything, to forge trust into lies, that is a sin heavier than theft. Gasps rippled through the pews. A woman in the back murmured, "He's talking about them." My daughter-in-law's face flushed crimson. My son lowered his head, shame pulling at his shoulders. Emily clutched her hands so tightly her knuckles turned white. And me? I sat in the center aisle, sunlight pouring through stained glass, the colors falling across my chair. For the first time, I didn't shrink under the weight of their stares. The chair that once symbolized weakness now gleamed in holy light, a throne of dignity. I said nothing. I didn't need to. My silence was louder than every whisper, stronger than every rumor. When the service ended, the crowd parted like water around me. People nodded respectfully, some even murmured, "Stay strong." Their support was quiet but unmistakable. But as I reached the doors, I saw him. My son's wife stormed out first, her heels stabbing the pavement. My son followed, shoulders hunched. Emily lingered behind, torn, her eyes meeting mine only for a heartbeat before she looked away. And there, at the bottom of the steps, stood my son-in-law, fists clenched so tight his knuckles were white, jaw set like stone. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. Because in those fists, I saw the storm brewing. The day of reckoning arrived on a Tuesday. Clear skies, sharp winds, the kind of day where lies had nowhere to hide. I rolled into the courthouse, the hum of chatter already thick in the air. Reporters lingered near the steps, cameras in hand, waiting for the kind of story that spreads faster than truth itself. In my lap was a folder, not bills, not threats, but salvation. Bank records, forgery notices, documents stamped official. The paper they had tried to use against me would now be the weapon to end them. Inside, the clerk directed me to the sheriff's office. Sheriff Daniels, steady as a mountain, greeted me with a nod. "Mr. Thompson. You're right on time." He flipped through the folder, his eyes narrowing. Then he closed it with a decisive slap. "Forgery. Fraud. Attempted theft. This isn't family drama anymore. This is criminal." My daughter-in-law's voice pierced the hall before I could respond. "He's lying. He's twisting everything." She stormed toward us, dragging my son in her wake. Her face flushed, eyes wild. "He's senile. He doesn't know what he's signing, what he's saying." The sheriff cut her off, his voice like a gavel. "Ma'am, the documents are certified. You forged his name. That's a felony." The crowd that had gathered murmured loudly. A reporter jotted notes, camera shutters clicked. My son shifted uneasily, sweat dripping at his temple. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I simply sat there, my chair steady beneath me, silent witness to the truth. "They forged my name," I said quietly. "Now I will let the law erase theirs." My daughter-in-law lunged forward, fury spilling from every step, but deputies blocked her. My son muttered something under his breath, but even he couldn't meet my eyes. The sheriff continued, his voice calm, almost merciful. "Effective immediately, the investigation begins. And until this is resolved, you are blacklisted. No banks, no credit, no employment. And the church board has been informed, they won't have you back, not until this is finished." The words fell like hammers. My daughter-in-law's mouth opened and closed, but no sound came. My son's shoulders collapsed, the last fragments of pride falling away in front of everyone. Around us, people whispered, not against me this time, but against them. "Thieves. Disgraceful. Imagine stealing from your own father." The sting of gossip that had once burned me now cut them instead. I rested my hand on the armrest of my chair. For weeks, it had been a cage, a symbol of shame. Today, it was something else entirely. It was proof I had survived long enough to watch them fall. And then, the climax. As the sheriff handed papers to the clerk, a group of reporters surged forward. "Mr. Thompson, is it true your son tried to steal your home?" "Ma'am, how do you respond to these charges?" My daughter-in-law shoved past them, face twisted, voice shrill. "We'll fight this. He's nothing without us." But the words rang hollow, swallowed by the sound of shutters snapping, pens scribbling, voices recording her downfall. And then, like a rat fleeing daylight, my son bolted. He pushed through the courthouse doors, down the steps, reporters chasing him, cameras flashing, microphones thrust in his face. The sight was seared into me, my boy, once my pride, now a spectacle of shame, hunted not by me, but by the truth. It was late when the knock came. Slow at first, then frantic. I wheeled to the door, the house silent except for the hollow sound of her fists pounding against wood. "Dad, please," Emily's voice cracked through the night. "Open the door." "I can't," her words dissolved into sobs. Through the window, I saw her collapsed on the porch, knees pressed into the boards, hair tangled, eyes swollen from tears. She was alone. No husband, no partner, just my daughter, stripped of all the defenses she'd built. I opened the door only a fraction, enough for the light to spill across the threshold. My chair rolled forward until it met the gap, the steel frame shining between us like a wall. She reached for me, trembling fingers stretching across the space. "Dad. I was wrong. I didn't know about the debts, the lies. I should have listened. Please, don't leave me out here." Her sobs echoed against the walls, a sound raw enough to shake the foundations of the house. I looked at her, my little girl, broken, but behind the tears, I saw something else, the choices she had made, the silence she had kept, the betrayal she had let grow. The chair between us seemed heavier than ever. Not just wood and steel, but the years of trust she had broken, the distance she had carved with her silence. My hands gripped the armrests, steady, unyielding. Forgiveness isn't free, and trust is priceless. Her shoulders shook. She pressed her forehead to the wood, sobbing harder. "Please, Dad, just let me in." I didn't move. I didn't open the door further. Her sobs cracked the silence of the house, each sound rattling through the halls like thunder after lightning. And I knew, this was only the beginning of her begging. The courthouse was packed that morning. Word had spread across town like wildfire, neighbors, churchgoers, even men from my son's former office filled the benches. They weren't there for me. They were there to see justice. The judge entered, robes heavy, eyes stern. Papers shuffled, voices hushed. And then, with a sharp bang of the gavel, silence reigned. "Case of forgery and fraud, State versus Thompson," the clerk announced. I rolled forward to the center, every eye following me. The wheels squeaked against polished floors, echoing louder than footsteps. But I didn't shrink this time. I sat tall, my chair gleaming beneath the courtroom lights. The same chair they had once thrown into the rain like garbage now stood as my throne. The prosecutor laid out the evidence: loan applications, forged signatures, bank confirmations. Each piece another nail in the coffin of their lies. My daughter-in-law's face contorted with every page turned, every word spoken. Finally, the judge looked at my son. "Do you deny these charges?" My son opened his mouth, but no words came. His silence, the same silence that had abandoned me weeks ago, now betrayed him. The gavel struck. Forgery confirmed. Fraud confirmed. You will face charges under state law. The crowd erupted. Some gasped, others muttered, but a few clapped quietly, like justice was a hymn they had been waiting to hear. Deputies stepped forward, handcuffs gleaming in the light. My daughter-in-law screamed, thrashing against their grip. You can't do this. He's lying. He's nothing without us. But the deputies dragged her back. Her voice cracked, shrill, lost under the weight of her own downfall. My son stood frozen, pale, sweat dripping down his temple. When the cuffs closed around his wrists, he flinched like a child caught stealing. From the benches, someone whispered, "Stealing from your own father, unforgivable." I didn't need to say a word. The community had spoken for me. The judge turned to me. "Mr. Thompson, do you have anything further?" I nodded once, steady. "Yes, Your Honor. I've amended my will." A ripple ran through the room. My daughter's eyes widened. My son's head jerked toward me. I continued, voice calm but firm. "This house, this land, it will not go to them. It will go to those who know what loyalty means. I've arranged for the estate to pass to the veterans' home. Let it stand for those who carried others when no one else would." Gasps again. My daughter pressed a hand to her mouth. My son sagged as though the floor had caved beneath him. And then, the moment I had known would come. Emily stepped forward, trembling, eyes filled with tears. She reached out a hand toward me, desperate, broken. "Dad, please." For a heartbeat, I saw the little girl she once was, clinging to my hand during thunderstorms. But that little girl was gone. What stood before me was a woman who had chosen silence over truth, betrayal over loyalty. I gripped the armrest of my chair, my knuckles white. Her hand hovered inches away, but I didn't take it. Her eyes begged for mercy. But my grip on the chair reminded me, I had carried myself further than they ever could. The gavel struck one final time. Court adjourned. I rolled toward the exit as voices rose behind me. Some cheered, some whispered, but all of them parted like a sea, making way. The sunlight hit me as I rolled onto the courthouse steps. The air was cool, sharp, alive. They had thrown my chair into the rain to shame me. Today, it carried me into justice. Backhand index pointing right. If you liked this story, like the video, subscribe, and share your impressions in the comments. To hear the next story, click the box on the left.